around about 1984, and I'd written a load of songs, and I came over and started a band called Mick and the Maelstroms. And we were playing in a club, I think it was Area. And after I'd finished playing the last song, this guy comes up to me and he says, how do you know that song? And I said, well, I wrote it. And he said, wow, that's weird because I just recorded it. So we had a conversation and it found out that he knew my manager's brother who had given him the song to record. I had a kind of a deal, songwriting deal. And so I got speaking to him and he said he was a musician also. And he invited me to a gig. So I went to one of his gigs and it was called was it the Dharma Bums, his band?
Yeah, Phil Hemley and the Dharma Bums.
So I was there and there was, I noticed that there was a guy there who shall remain nameless, and Oswal was there, and they were handing out kind of flyers that had free events. But on the back of these Xerox flyers was advertisements for various local underground acts or whatever. So I started to speak to this person and I said, well, how much does it cost to advertise the band on the back of these? I thought maybe it would give the band some extra publicity. And he said it was like $30 or something, and I'll hand out 300 flyers or whatever. So I thought, well, you know, I might as well do that. So we got these flyers made up, and I got to know Oswald through that.
Yeah, but I was telling you, you know, not to advertise.
And then he came round to our producers. The guy was producing me in his basement, Duncan. Yeah. And he knocked on the door, and I was like, Oswald, what are you doing here? And he said, I come here to tell you, don't give that guy any more money. So I thought, wow, this is really honest of him.
It's like, no, it's going nowhere. But you know, no, but a true relationship, you know, really like developed after that. And I was promoting another downtown act, and also Mondo, New York, the film at that time.
Oh yeah, I remember that now.
I was giving little promotions with running to places like, oh God. Anyway, theaters and other places giving out promotions. And Mondo, New York at the time was doing very badly. And so like, I ended up promoting some of the people that was in the film and a number of other things.
Well, was this like a downtown production?
Yeah, it was a downtown production with a lot of downtown artists and some major rock and roll figures at the time. So it was like a kind of traumatic in art kind of moment, almost like a transitioning for some strange reason. Because it seems like all of the movements were suddenly kind of converging on each other. And I think Mondo, New York was an excellent film, highly underrated, but it gives you some sort of a scope into what the downtown scene was at the time. You know? And promoting your band, you know, at the time I figured, I said, well, I have enough to promote music and film, and I thought I could do it, you know, and plus do my own art.
You know, Oz was reaching a kind of a crisis with the cash flow because he still had this. He was staying with somebody who was charging him rent to stay there, I believe. Yeah. And he was falling behind with the rent, and I was lending Oz the money, thinking, well, you can pay it off, you know, whatever. And at some point, I kind of he mentioned that the guy he was staying with wanted this Basquiat painting that he had, and that was the first time I had heard about Basquiat because actually the guy I was living with, the guy who was recording us, mentioned in passing, there's this guy who's become screamingly famous artist, and I'd never heard of him, but that was the first time I actually heard the name. Then when I said that he had a painting by this guy, I was thinking, oh, that's that famous guy. I was thinking, well, you better hang on to that.
I knew that I was not going to stay at the place that I was living in at the time, because I had like a couple of failed things that happened that year that didn't tide me over so that I could pay that rent and pay off Brooklyn Gas and Electric. One of the things was lost contracts. I lost the contract with several of the artists I was working with, and a few other things just fell. They just panned out, and so I was like in real desperation. So knowing that I would eventually lose the place, I gave the painting to Mick, and I gave everything that held some value to me to close friends of mine, like my gallery manager, who I was very close to, Jose Hernandez. I gave him my other paintings, paintings that I'd gotten from numerous other artists like Push Wagner, who gave me one of his paintings before he left town to go back to Norway. I also gave up other personal items to other personal friends that I trusted and loved. So that's how Mick got the Basquiat. And it was surprising to me that he had held on to it for so long.
That's another story.
Totally another story.
It ended up that Oz went through kind of various changes, even becoming homeless at one point, which I thought was unthinkable. I just couldn't believe that, you know, he'd come to that. And so this painting became sort of something that was just stored away. As it turned out, it ended up being stored away for, I think, like over 30 years because I'd lost contact with him. I couldn't really sell the thing. I'd contacted the Basquiat estate and got some kind of, if you want to call it, bad vibes from the father. You know, he didn't seem to want to know about it. And I thought, well, I'm not going to spend $100 to try and convince this guy that I got this Basquiat from this mysterious figure who's disappeared. So. So it kind of, you know, ended up just being stashed away, and from time to time I was thinking, I wonder if this is worth millions or absolutely nothing.
Quite frankly, I thought you took it, went back to Europe, and sold it. Like I was like severely depressed. I'd say, at least my buddy Mick, he's off enjoying himself after selling it somewhere, and I don't have to worry about paintings or anything like that. It was like something. And seriously, I was thinking in my mind. I said, Mick he's probably sold it good. He sold it and got out of here.
Well, it got to the point where, you know, I'd mentioned it to a few friends in past. They said, well, you better get something together with this and sell it, you know, before you know everybody dies off and you can't explain anything. So I thought, all right, well, let's try the internet. So I found something. I was spelling his name wrong. I was spelling it Oswald, and you know, I noticed a few articles, but there was no contact. So eventually, I think it was LinkedIn, wasn't it?
LinkedIn. Yeah, LinkedIn. You got me on LinkedIn.
I called him up, and he couldn't believe it. You know, it was like, wow. You know, after all these years,
couldn't.
And it turns out he'd moved down to Florida.
No. When you got in touch with me, you know what I said? I said, could it be that Mick still has it? And then you said, there's something I want to talk to you personally about. And he still got it. Could it be?
Yeah, you couldn't believe it, that I still had it. I said, well, you know, this.
Because I was glad to hear from you, and I said, well, I thought that you had it, you know, and you had probably moved from the United States, or perhaps you were visiting, or you probably come back into the States again. And you said, there's something personally I want to talk to you about. You know, I sold that years ago, and perhaps I'll give you, but you still had it.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
So, you know, we got into this conversation about, well, if we're ever going to try and present this to the world, you know, either to sell it or put it in a museum or whatever, you know, the authentication process wasn't possible anymore since the tribunal that did it had broken up, and galleries and auction houses, they weren't interested in anything unless you had this piece of paper saying it was authentic. So, okay, so we're just wondering how. you started off in Brooklyn, but mainly you were working out of Manhattan. So how did Manhattan become the base for your artistic endeavors?
Well, I had moved from Brooklyn when my mother separated from my father back in '69. We moved to a house in Mount Vernon, New York. At some point, I said I wanted more expression in my life. You know, I was young. I wanted to get going, and so it was like time for me and my brother to move out. And we said, "Hey, man, where we gonna go, man?" Because even though we were living in Westchester, each like every day we'd get on the train and go to Manhattan and hang out in the Village. And we'd link up on parties or go to all the clubs down there. So we were like the first artists to actually live in an industrial building. And pretty much I could say in Midtown, almost Midtown Manhattan. Our place was located at 202 East 29th Street. And it was across the street, I remember, from a landmark house. It was a carriage house. It was directly across the street from us. And it's where I met, started my art career and meeting and throwing events and meeting other artists and people in collaborations. Kikul Saito, very interesting and very close and dear friend of mine, you know. God rest him, he's dead now. Is that when Saito came to the studio, my career, you can say, kind of took off because through the people that he knew and the jobs and the various jobs that he was doing for these people. So Saito rented space from us where he could do his carpentry. Because Saito is he's excellent carpenter, excellent. As a matter of fact, Japan makes some of the best carpenters in the world. Saito got in touch with Robert, and he brought his troupe down, and we agreed to the money, and I think it was for 2 weeks or a month that his troupe stayed with us, and that's how I met Robert Wilson, and that's how I got involved with, and early on anyway, with the Bert Hoffman Foundation, and Saito did too. '70s that graffiti became more than just spraying your tag. There was actual messages. Messages began to be expressed. You know, people were, and sentiments and other things. You know, I hate you, kill this one, that one, kill, kill, kill. I remember Pastor Walden said, kill, 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 kill. It was kind of scary. But here's the whole thing. People were beginning to use more imagination, and then, boom, a few more years later, Keith Haring comes. And everybody, at least that I know, can say, when I first saw my first Keith Haring, it was like, yeah, it did something. You thought about it all day long. And then I began this, it seems like during this period, during the 70s, 76, 77, that graffiti became to be more than just a name, just a tag, you know?
What would you say a tag was? Can you just...
Okay, a tag is actually your name.
Okay.
You know? And what graffiti artists used to do, at least the traditional graffiti artists, which you still see, people just leave their name or their a scroll of something that represents them.
So it was not necessarily the name. It was like a trademark, like a shortened.
And something like like your name is Mick. It would say Mickey Star, or I was your Wiz. I was Wiz. And then I found that there was a couple other people called Wiz out there, and they offended me. So that's not me. And so you'd leave your tag, and your tag was yours. And so one night, I think it was back in, I think it was 77, I think it was. I said, wait a minute, everybody's leaving their tag all over the place. I got in my car and drove around and found a building. I think it was off of the Bruckner Expressway that had a clean wall that nobody had attacked yet, and I spray painted my tag, Whiz. There's a big difference between street art. Gallery works are almost like commissions. You do one work, and the gallery, the proprietor of that gallery looks at it, whoever the proprietor is, and he or she says, I want you to do some work that is similar to that, or work with a theme, or work that has some kind of similarities, because they want to sell more. If they sell one, they got one that's somewhat similar to the next one.
Consistency.
And that's why I like the 18th century. Maybe they did the same thing to Matisse and said, okay, now paint a lake, and now paint vice versa. But the whole thing is, street art is just right out of your head at the moment. There's no theme to go out and paint something else. You can paint this, you can paint any number of different images in your head, or any different stuff, whatever you feel like, painting on some wall or painting anything. That's how street art is. It's different. It's more free. It's just what comes out of your head. Yeah. Yeah, I met Jean-Michel through a fellow by the name of Stephen Hooper and Baird Jones. They were close friends. Just like I remember Aristides Duval had a publication called a Hot List, which he would hand out at gallery openings. And Baird also had his private list, and he would forward people from galleries to his other parties all around New York. But at that time, it was kind of a little bit chaotic. I mean, with so many events and so many things happening. So you met a lot of artists and a lot of people who was on the scene, who was prevalent on the scene at the time. But you didn't really think too much of it because it was something that happened every day. Because living in New York, being an artist at that time, it seems like every night there was either a book signing, a film opening, and it was always an opening, because that's the whole point, great food openings.
And you mentioned that Baird Jones had a connection with Andy Warhol.
Oh, yes. I think Baird Jones ended up with some Andy Warhol films, if I can recall. And now I think about what happened to those films. Yeah, but Baird Jones had a good connection with Warhol, and they did some things together and some publicity together, a number of things. Well, I heard there was an art show protesting apartheid on the Lower East Side. When I got there, I realized that it was a paint out. And all the artists they were painting. Well, let me tell you a little bit what a paint out is. A paint out is where artists paint on a certain theme, and they do works in their own individual style or method according to the theme of the paint out. Let's say if the paint out is a protest, then artists do kind of protest works, protesting something.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the simplicity of the paint out. You know, it's to do works according to one theme.
And what was the theme in this case?
The theme was apartheid. When I met Jean-Michel, he was talking with several other artists. I approach him, and we have a bit of a conversation. And he asks me, he says, "Do you have any work here?" And I said, "Are you doing it?" And I said, "No." I said, "But I have my sketchbook." And he says, "Oh, can I see a few sketches?" And I show him a few. We go through a couple of them, and he looks at one and he takes a fancy to like one or two, but one in particular. And so he says, "You know what, can I have this? I really like this one." And I said, "Sure." And like he's really like kind of polite about it, and almost kind of a little embarrassed, like asking for a sketch. And I said, "No, it's all right. You can have one." He says, "You know what? I'll trade you." And he gave me the painting which I have now. He walked around, and like 5 minutes later, he came back with this painting. And he gave it to me, and he says, "This is me." And I say, "Yeah, right." And I take it, and he had the little look on his face, which is kind of strange. He had this like little smile on his face. And we had a couple of more words, and I went home.
So then you took the piece back to your studio?
Yeah, I stashed it where I kept a whole lot of other miscellaneous things that I'd gotten and received. And I forgot about it, I didn't think too much of it. Matter of fact, I didn't particularly like it, to be honest with you.
When do you remember seeing him again?
Well, the last time I saw him was at the Vrej Begomian Gallery in New York City. And he was signing posters. I don't know why he was doing it. It makes me wonder why he would be promoting Jack Kerouac's book. And but he was fascinated with that whole era anyway, the beat era, and all the things accompanying it. And he signed this poster to me, and I took it home, and that was pretty much the last time I saw him. The next thing I heard months later, that he had passed away.
What happened to yours?
Well, mine, when I lost my studio, I had rolled it up, and I put it, in a safe place in a tube. And I left it with a lot of things, a lot of personal things and other artwork in my studio. Because when I lost my studio, long story here, but I left it. And right now, I would love to find it. I really would love to find it.
I thought about the painting, and I had this idea that it could be either worth nothing, it could be real, it could be not real in the minds of other people. And so it was almost like a sort of a Schrodinger's cat type situation where it was worth something or it was worth nothing, and it was an absolute fake. And this sort of opens up this kind of interesting idea that there's sort of like two realities going on. There's the one that Oswald has said to me many times. You know, we've raised possible objections to, you know, how he got it. He said it doesn't matter what anybody says about whether it looks like this or it looks like that. I know he put it in my hand. I know that I looked at him, and when he gave it to me, it was a real event. And so you're facing that, and then you're facing somebody looking at it and saying, well, this doesn't look like he did this, or it doesn't look like he did that. And so, you know, you have these two viewpoints going on at the same time, which is an interesting thing, because even with established old masters, and the experts have years and years of experience of analysing in depth the kind of paints used, and even then they can't really definitively say all the time who did what paintings. You know, I found this was like, you know, when I was making the album, it was like every step of the way. It was like you were hanging off a cliff and somebody was stamping on your fingers with hobnail boots. It was like... do you have any idea of the time frame or dates of when these events occurred, when you were interacting with Jean-Michel Basquiat?
Well, I can't be sure, but it's anywhere between 1984 and 87.
And just finally, do you have any personal recollections of what you may have shared with Mr. Basquiat, like either art or interest in art?
Yeah, we had, if I can think about it, we had one thing that we did have in common. We liked bebop. And we liked that kind of whole B era. Mm-hmm. We used to talk about it since I was old. They used to ask me various questions. That's the one thing we had. He loved bebop. He loved jazz, and we kind of worked out the chemistry of jazz. Anyway, that's all I can say about it.
Okay.
I don't care if they say it was done by Munchkins. All I know is that Jean-Michel Basquiat put this painting in my hands.